Yeah, from the phone. Okay. Okay. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم ربي اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. السلام عليكم جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته. So the personality of Imam Ali alayhi afdalus salam is a unique personality in that no matter how we look at the life of the Imam, whether we look at his actions through the course of history, or whether we look at his sermons and sayings, we find that the life of the Imam is full of wisdom and guidance. And if we were to examine his life in more depth, we would come to the conclusion that we can derive so many more lessons from his life, and that we can apply these lessons in our lives, whether that be on an individual level, whether it be on a societal level, or whether it even be on a political level. And today, basically, I wanted to speak about a famous saying of the Imam that is basically remained popular in recent times, and that is this saying of the Imam, which he says, people are of two types. They're either your brother in faith or your like in creation. Now, that was my initial topic that I wanted to speak about, but then I came across this book, and I think I'd like to recommend it to everyone. And it's basically called Justice and Remembrance, Introducing the Spirituality of Imam Ali by Reza Shah Kazemi. And I actually found that if we look at the context surrounding this statement of the Imam, we can basically draw a more wholesome picture of what the Imam is trying to say. So this saying of the Imam is actually found in letter 52 of Nahjul Balagha, and he's addressing his close companion Malik al-Ashtar. The Imam is saying to Malik that he's going to appoint him as the governor of Egypt, and he basically highlights some of the key roles that he requires from a governor. And the Imam does this very briefly, he just gives a few lines. But then immediately after giving those key roles, the Imam then stresses on a few pieces of advice for Malik. And the very first piece of advice that the Imam gives to Malik is that he says to Malik, fear Allah. And then he says to Malik to be obedient to God and to follow the commands and prohibitions that are found in the religion. So the Imam is basically inviting Malik to be more fearful, to have taqwa of Allah, and to follow the religion down to a T, because he's going to become the governor for the Imam. Now, straight after this, the Imam focuses on Malik's soul, and he says to Malik that I want you to purify yourself, to focus on this nafs, and to purify it from the inclinations that you have, from the desires that you have to worldly gains, to material gains. So through these 2 points that I've just mentioned, we can see a number of things that the Imam is stressing on. He's basically saying to Malik that, look, the effect of power is so strong that even the strongest of believers can be swayed by it. And in order to prevent yourself from going astray, the Imam is basically saying to Malik that, be fearful of God, be obedient to Him, and to purify oneself. So we find so many lessons, and it's interesting as well because Malik isn't just any ordinary companion. We all know this. We all know the stories of Malik being one of the right-hand men of the Imam. And then even when we look at the assassination of the Malik, when that news reaches Imam Ali says a few interesting statements about Malik. He says that had Malik been a mountain, He would be a solitary mountain amongst the others, meaning that Malik would be like, for example, in a mountain range, he would be the peak. He would be the one that soars above the others. So his stature in terms of his contemporaries is like no other. And the Imam then goes on to say that if Malik were like a rock, he would be impenetrable, meaning that the strength of Malik's faith and his commitment to the Imam is so strong. And yet, this same companion, this same fortress of strength and Iman for the Imam is being advised by the Imam to fear God, because this position of power can have its effects on the people. So from this book, basically, I wanted to then go on and read the extract in which we find that statement that I was talking about in the beginning. And this comes a little bit after that advice that has been given to Malik. So basically, in the letter, the Imam says, and this is a translation from this book, infuse your hearts with mercy for the subjects, love for them and kindness towards them. Be not like a ravenous beast of prey above them, seeking to devour them. For they are of two types, either your brother in religion or your like in creation. Mistakes slip from them, defects emerge from them, deliberately or accidentally. So bestow upon them in your forgiveness and your pardon, just as you would have God bestow upon you his forgiveness and pardon. For you are above them, and the one who has authority over you is above you. And God is above him who appointed you. He expects you to satisfy their needs, and through them he tests you. So we see many key themes being mentioned here by the Imam. First of all, the Imam is basically stressing that the person who is under, who has the authority over people, must act with mercy. They must act with love and kindness. And this is irrespective of whether this person is a brother in faith or is not from the faith that that the people adhere to. Secondly, the Imam is stressing that Malik should basically overlook the mistakes of the people, because it's our human nature. We tend to make mistakes, and we must be forgiving, because if we expect Allah to be forgiving of us, then we must be forgiving to the rest of creation. So these are really beautiful words. And in the context of things as well, he's saying to Malik that, look, you need to be compassionate to people and not be like the other governors that have preceded you, who go into a territory and just oppress the people, that they are involved in killings and oppression, but rather you need to be merciful, irrespective of the background of that individual. So basically, the reason I spoke about this is because I wanted to highlight something, and that is that, look, when we look at this statement, this letter to Malik, the Imam is basically giving advice to someone who's going to be a governor. Now, if we were to look at this and compare it to contemporary times, imagine a leader of a country was giving advice to one of their foreign ministers, someone that's placed in a different land. When we think about this, it would be obvious that the leader would stress and focus on their foreign minister to encourage their doctrine, their beliefs onto that other nation. So for example, in the Western context, if someone was to send a foreign delegate to a different country, they would stress on promoting democracy, they would stress on human rights and freedoms, and they would stress on these qualities to their foreign minister. But the Imam, he has no real agenda, in the sense that he doesn't promote the religion particularly to like force people to come towards the religion. He doesn't have an agenda that covers his morality. The morality that the Imam is promoting is first and foremost in his advice to Malik. He's promoting ethics, he's promoting morality, and he's promoting basic freedoms as his main principle to his governor. And therefore, when we compare this to the situation that we see today, and we look at, for example, the devastating news that we see in Ukraine, where foreign forces are coming in and destroying a country, they're bombing this country, destroying buildings, and people are being displaced from their homes. Families are basically suffering casualties and being forced to the border of their own home country and being forced to settle in foreign lands. And all of this is a result of countries who claim to promote certain ethics and morals, and yet they are not putting the interests of these people at the forefront. They're not putting these ethics at the forefront, but rather they are playing a geopolitical game in a country and using the Ukrainians as a pawn in their game of chess. And unfortunately, it's causing the loss of lives. And inshallah, I hope that from reflecting on letters like this from the Imam, from these great wise personalities, many people can learn lessons that can be employed in their day-to-day lives, whether it be on a political level or on any other level. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, wal asr, inna al-insana lafi khusr, illa alladhina amanu wa amilu s-salihat, wa tawasaw bil-haqq, wa tawasaw bil-sabr. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala ashraf al-anbiya wal-mursaleen wa ala ahli bayt al-tayyibin al-tahirin. Now, in the second khutbah, I basically wanted to expand on what I've discussed earlier and put more focus on the particular statement that we were discussing right at the beginning, which is that people are of two types. They're either your brother in faith or your like in creation. And I basically wanted to look at this from two aspects. I wanted to look at the international response to putting moral qualities at the forefront. And then I also wanted to look at our own response. So first of all, when it comes to the international response, there's been many consequences of what's been going on recently in the news. So many businesses have been sanctioned. And, in very different fields, we see lots of sanctions and impositions being imposed on these people. So I just wanted to focus on a few different areas, and particularly in the area of sports. Although this isn't this is just a particular category, we can see this in different areas like business and so on. But in the domain of sport, we see that, for example, three different areas. If we look at the Formula One, we look at the International Olympic Committee, and we look at FIFA, we see that they've basically imposed sanctions on the Russians, and they claim to do this from a moral and human rights perspective. So, for example, Formula One have decided to take away the Russian Grand Prix from the calendar. We look at the International Olympic Committee, and they have not allowed athletes to basically train and represent the Russian flag and basically be an independent entity. And when we look at FIFA, they've banned Russian clubs from participating in European competitions and banned the Russian national side as well. Now, when we look at this response, we have to ask, obviously, that why is this being done? So these countries are basically trying to promote their own morality, and they're trying to put the human rights of others at the forefront. However, we need to ask the question, is this from a pure intention, or is there a kind of hidden agenda involved in these actions? Because it's easy to put these morality at the forefront, but if we have another agenda at the play, then we're basically going to put these interests in a biased perspective. So if you look at Formula One, for example, and we look at the conflict in Russia, in Ukraine, they've sanctioned Russia, and yet this same institution allowed races to take place in different countries that were involved in occupying foreign lands. So, and these foreign lands, I mean Yemen and Armenia, for example, and yet those countries, their Formula One Grand Prix are being put on the calendar still. We look at the International Olympic Committee, and they've sanctioned Russia whilst hosting an Olympic Games in a country in which there were crackdown on protests in Hong Kong, and there were concentration camps of Muslims in that same country. And then, for example, when we look at FIFA, they've banned the Russian nation from competing, but they've still kept other nations within their sports. So it begs the question that, is this morality from a pure perspective, or is there an agenda? Now, it can be argued that these institutions are doing this because of the public outcry. They don't want a backlash from the public because this conflict has been put on the forefront of our media, and so there's a lot of anger and resentment about what is going on. But if this is the case, then we basically have a duty ourselves, and that duty is to raise awareness of other conflicts as well, other conflicts in different countries, and raise that awareness so that there's pressure not just in one area, and that there's not just a bias towards one conflict, but that we treat people equally because they are likes in creation, and we consider other countries as well. Now, before I end, I basically wanted to not just point the finger at others, but also look at ourselves and look at our own response when it comes to these kind of conflicts. So first of all, when it comes to conflicts, sometimes we are quick to criticize other people, we're quick to criticize other countries and other oppressors and regimes, but at the same time, when someone comes and oppresses other people in the name of Islam or in the name of Shia Islam, for example, or other countries use our ideology, we're quick to defend these countries despite the human rights oppressions that we see. So sometimes we need to ask the question that, do we overlook the transgressions of our own people, but we're quick to point the finger at others? And in terms of the letter of the Imam, I basically wanted to end with this point by Reza Shah Kazemi in the book that I mentioned before. He basically highlights that the letter that the Imam gives to Malik is a letter that contains universal ethical principles that can be applied in many different areas. So it's not just a political doctrine that is given to Malik, but it's actually a universal ethical statement from which we can derive so many beneficial outcomes. So if you look at this on a societal level, I basically wanted to end by saying that we as a society, we as individual people, we tend to, when looking at this statement of the Imam, we tend to promote this statement that people are our brothers in faith, or there are likes in creation. But do we really adhere to this principle that the Imam is promoting? Because when we look at, for example, a simple action like charity, many Muslims will be quick to respond to situations in which Muslims are oppressed, in which Muslims are the victims of conflicts, in which Muslims are the victims of poverty. And we're quick to help these charities and these different organizations. But then when it comes to people that are outside our faith, that are not our brothers in faith, we tend to overlook them. We tend to dehumanize them even. And we don't give them the same treatment that we give to our fellow brothers in faith. And so from this perspective, we need to really question ourselves and say, do we help organizations that help conflicts in other countries that aren't a Muslim majority country, for example? Do we help causes in our own country which affects people that are not from our faith? Because there are many charities even within this country that have been set up by Muslims to help Muslims. But are there charities set up to help those people in need regardless of their faith? And for example, I just wanted to give just one last example before I finish. And I was looking at basically this video by Mahfal Ali, and you can see this on YouTube, and it's basically talking about poverty in the UK. And it's really hit home when I watched this, when I saw that there's a stat that the person gave in this talk in which he says that food banks in this country have become so prominent that there are actually more food banks in this country than there are branches of Greggs. There's more food banks than there are branches of KFC in this country. So if you were to just imagine that for a second, that's a shocking statistic. And so many people are living in poverty. So many people don't even have £100 in savings. And therefore we have a moral responsibility to be equal in our actions, not just to be discriminate because people are from our own faith and we want to help the people from our own faith, but we need to have a more balanced approach before we can expect others to have a balanced approach in the way that they act in their ethics and morality. So, inshallah, we pray that we can help towards these causes and promote equality in our actions and our day-to-day lives. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Allahumma salli ala Muhammadin al-Mustafa wa ala Ali al-Murtada wa ala Fatimatu al-Zahra salamu alayhi wa ala al-Hasan al-Mujtaba wa ala al-Husayn al-Shaheed bi Karbala wa ala Ali ibn Husayn wa ala Muhammad ibn Ali wa Ja'far ibn Muhammad وموسى بن جعفر وعلي بن موسى ومحمد بن علي وعلي بن محمد وحسن بن علي وعلى حجة ابن الحسن القائم المهدي المنتظر اللهم أجل لوليك الفرج وسهل الله مخرجه اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد